Hey guys, tonight we stand on the edge of a world you wouldn't even recognize. It's 20,000 years ago, and you're shivering on a cliff of wind-scoured permafrost, somewhere in what we'd now call Siberia. Your breath freezes, almost before it leaves your mouth, turning into tiny ice crystals that sting your cheeks. The sun, low and pale, casts a cold gold light over a horizon buried under endless white. To your left, the tundra stretches flat and bleak. To your right, a frozen sea groans beneath slabs of drifting ice. The air smells faintly of musk. Herds of woolly mammoth are near, their low rumbles carried by the wind. Behind you, a small cluster of hides, lashed over mammoth bones, marks your camp, smoke curling up from a fire barely alive in the biting wind. Somewhere out there, across this frozen expanse, is a bridge, one made not of stone or wood, but of earth and ice, linking this world to a whole other continent you've never seen. You'll need to cross it soon. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this without every scrap of grit you've got. Before we set foot on that land bridge, hit that subscribe so you never miss a night where we wander into the strangest corners of history. And if you're watching this from somewhere cold, tell me your location and your current temperature in the comments. I want to know if you'd even last an hour out here. Bundle up, because tonight's tale doesn't stop until the ice melts beneath your feet. Let's walk into the heart of the late Ice Age together. You trudge forward, each step crunching through a crust of snow. The year is roughly 18,000 BCE, deep inside the last glacial maximum. Imagine the world's oceans, locked away inside titanic ice sheets that smother whole continents. The Laurentide and Cordilleran glaciers dominate North America. The Fennoscandian ice sheet covers much of Europe. Between them, vast corridors of frozen wasteland stretch farther than your eyes can follow. Temperatures hover well below freezing year-round, with only brief seasonal thaws allowing patches of moss and hardy grasses to break the monochrome. This cold isn't just weather, it's a force shaping continents. Because so much seawater is trapped in ice, sea levels are more than 20 meters lower than today, coastlines creep outward, revealing new landscapes, and in the far northeast of Asia, where Siberia narrows toward the Pacific, something remarkable has happened. A massive swath of seabed connecting Asia to North America has emerged. We'll call it Berinia. It's not just a bridge, it's a whole region, stretching nearly 1,000 miles from Siberia to Alaska. This is no smooth highway either, it's a patchwork of dry grasslands, frozen rivers, and boggy lowlands, sculpted by permafrost and seasonal meltwater. The ice sheets are so vast they alter the jet streams, the climate patterns, even the shape of winds sweeping across continents. Standing here, you'd hear nothing but the hiss of air over snow and the occasional creak of shifting frost. If you glance upward on a clear night, the aurora ripples green and violet across a sky crowded with stars brighter than any you've seen in your modern life, because here there's no city glow to swallow them. Humans have been in northeastern Asia for tens of thousands of years, but life here is a constant gamble. You're not farming yet, no one is. Your world revolves around the hunt. Mammoth, steppe bison, and wild horse herds roam this frozen steppe tundra, grazing on dry grasses. You follow them, your survival bound to their migrations. The cold demands that you wrap yourself in layers of stitched hides, caribou fur for insulation, mammoth hide for wind protection, sinew thread binding it all together. Tools are chipped from flint or chert, hafted into wooden or bone handles. There's no metal, no woven cloth, nothing that can't be found, shaped or traded within this icy reach. The stakes are higher than simply avoiding starvation. Predators stalk the same herds you do. Cave lions, giant short-faced bears, packs of wolves larger than you've ever seen, and the cold, always the cold, tests your endurance. A single night without shelter could freeze you solid before morning. Yet here's the strange twist. For all its brutality, this land is a gateway. Because the seas have retreated, the continents are stitched together by new routes. And for the first time in millennia, it's possible to walk, literally walk from the old world into the new. You're standing at the very edge of human expansion into a hemisphere untouched by our kind. Every step forward will carry you into landscapes no human has ever seen, toward animals that have never learned to fear you, and into climates that will force you to reinvent every survival skill you've ever known. If you squint toward the east, you can almost imagine the faint line where Asia gives way to the broad, open belly of Beringia. Over the coming centuries, it will serve not just as a crossing, but as a home, a place where humans, plants and animals mingle in a frozen blend of Asia and America. For now, it's just another horizon you've never reached, and the wind in your face feels like a challenge. Your clan elders talk of warmer times, of summers when berries ripen and rivers run free, but those are months away. Right now the ice still rules and your choice is stark. Follow the herds north toward the unknown, or risk the long, hungry dark here on the Siberian edge. Either way, the story of the Americas begins in this frozen moment, with the first steps taken toward a bridge, made of earth and ice. You march on, the crunch of frozen ground beneath your boots of fur and hide matching the slow rhythm of the wind. Ahead, the terrain begins to shift, not much at first, just a subtle flattening, a widening of the horizon. This is the beginning of Beringia, though to you there's no sense of crossing into a new land, the way modern borders would mark it. It's simply a continuation of the world you know, but with a strange openness, a sky that seems bigger and the faint, salty tang of a distant sea that has pulled back to reveal a realm untouched by waves for thousands of years. The Bering Land Bridge, Beringia, spans roughly 1,000 miles from Siberia to Alaska at its greatest extent. It is not, as some might picture it, a narrow strip of dirt. It's a continent in its own right, an expanse of rolling plains, dry valleys, braided rivers, and patches of shrub tundra where dwarf willows barely reach your knee. In some places, permafrost lies just beneath the surface, locking the earth in icy armor. In others, meltwater pools in shallow basins, attracting herds and the predators that follow them. The size is staggering. At its peak, Beringia was as wide as modern-day Texas. It's not all flat either. Low hills ripple across the plains, carved by ancient rivers that once flowed to seas now long vanished. In winter, everything is iron hard, but come the brief summer, grasses, sedges and wildflowers burst into color, painting the land in swaths of gold, white and purple. This short bloom feeds an astonishing range of life. From where you stand, you can see dark shapes moving on the horizon, woolly mammoths, their curved tusks glinting in the low sun. These giants, some over 3 meters tall at the shoulder, use their tusks to sweep snow aside, revealing the grasses below. Nearby, herds of steppe bison, their massive heads lowered, paw through frost to graze. Musk oxen shuffle together for warmth, their thick coats a tangled curtain against the cold wind. Reindeer, caribou move in lines across the land, their hooves clicking softly on the frozen crust. Beringia is an Ice Age superhighway for life. Mammoth trails etch the land from one horizon to the other. Wolves shadow the herds, pacing in the distance. Arctic foxes and hares dart between snow drifts. Overhead, the croak of ravens cuts through the quiet, their black shapes stark against the pale sky. These animals move not because they understand the land bridge, but because instinct draws them toward better grazing grounds, away from the hunger of winter, toward the promise of summer growth. And humans, clever and opportunistic, follow. In your time, the landscape is a paradox. It's cold, yet not entirely frozen. The great ice sheets to the south, Laurentide in North America, Cordilleran along the Pacific coast, never fully swallow Beringia. Instead, the region remains largely ice-free, a rare pocket of dry, treeless steppe, amid a world choked by glaciers. Why? The climate here is shaped by wind patterns and low precipitation. Snow may fall, but it blows away or sublimates in the dry air, leaving the ground exposed in many places. This makes Beringia not just a bridge, but a corridor, an open door between continents. Imagine standing here at the heart of it, the ground beneath you a mix of frozen earth and ancient sediments that were once the seafloor. Shell fragments crunch under your foot, reminders of when waves rolled over this place. Fossil bones, mammoth, bison, even extinct horses, sometimes jut from eroded banks, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries of wind. The air is clear, almost painfully so. On days without wind, you can see for dozens of miles, the horizon hazed only by the shimmer of cold. At night, the temperature plummets, and the land is bathed in moonlight so bright it throws sharp shadows. The Milky Way stretches overhead, a frozen river of stars mirrored by the winding paths of snow-covered rivers below. If you're traveling now, your group moves deliberately. You carry everything you own. Spears tipped with flint, hide-wrapped bundles of dried meat, bone needles and sinew thread, fire-starting kits tucked safe in leather pouches. You travel in small numbers, maybe 20 to 30 people, so you can move faster and leave less trace for predators or rival groups to follow. Each day is a negotiation between pushing onward for better hunting grounds and conserving enough energy to survive the journey itself. This bridge, invisible to the people of the future, will one day be swallowed again by the sea, erasing all obvious trace of these treks. But for now, it is alive with motion, herds moving north and south, predators weaving between them, humans threading through both in search of their next meal. It's a place where Asia and America blend, where plants from one continent seed themselves in the soil of the other, where gene pools mix and new species emerge. You've walked out onto one of the most important crossroads in human history, though you don't know it yet. Every step you take here leaves footprints in permafrost that, if they survived, could tell your story to people 20 millennia in the future. This is more than a path to new hunting grounds. It's the artery through which the first humans will flow into an entire hemisphere, changing it forever. And as the wind picks up, driving icy crystals into your cheeks, you realize the truth. Beringia may be open, but it's not welcoming. You'll need skill, luck, and a stubborn refusal to freeze to make it across. And the journey has only just begun. You keep moving west to east, deeper into the white silence, until the landscape slowly starts to shift again. The low hills thin out, and the horizon pulls even farther away. You've left the familiar river valleys of Siberia behind, and what stretches before you now is the raw expanse of northeastern Asia's last frontier, home to some of the toughest people on Earth, the Ice Age hunters of Siberia. Life here is less about thriving and more about refusing to die. Your days are ruled by the bitter wind that can strip heat from your body faster than a polar night steals the sun. You keep your hands tucked inside the fur sleeves of your parka, though parka is a modern word. What you wear is a masterpiece of survival sewing, layers of reindeer hide, soft side inward, hair side out, stitched together with sinew thread. The hood is trimmed with wolf fur because it sheds frost better than anything else. Beneath that, you wrap your feet in layers of dry grass inside soft hide boots, to keep them from freezing solid. Everything you own has a purpose, and everything you carry has been earned. The flint blade in your hand, its edge sharper than steel, was struck from a nodule traded from a group 2 weeks' travel away. The spear shaft is straightened birch, fire-hardened, with a stone point hafted into place using hide glue and wrapped in sinew. On your belt a bone awl for piercing hides, a scraper for cleaning them, and a pouch holding your most precious possession, fire. The smoldering fungus inside stays alive for days, a portable ember ready to be coaxed into flame when you stop for camp. Your world is not empty, far from it. Even in this frozen wilderness, you're not alone. Other human groups range across Siberia, each with their own hunting territories and stories passed down by firelight. Some are friendly enough to trade, swapping hides for flint, meat for beads carved from mammoth ivory. Others are less generous. You've heard of raids where entire winter stores were stolen, leaving the victims to starve. Out here, survival doesn't always mean sharing. The land itself is a constant trial. In winter the rivers freeze solid enough to walk across, but the ice groans beneath your weight and fractures bloom like spiderwebs underfoot. In spring, meltwater turns everything to mud, making travel slow and exhausting. Mosquitoes swarm in choking clouds, driving people and animals nearly mad. Even in the warm months, frost can return overnight, killing plants and freezing streams. Your food is earned the hard way. Mammoth hunts are rare, dangerous affairs, requiring cooperation from every adult in the group. More often, you chase reindeer, using the terrain to drive them into narrow valleys, where spears can find their mark. Small game like hares and ptarmigan fill in the gaps. Fish pulled from ice holes add variety. Their oily flesh a precious source of calories in a land where every bite matters. You eat every part you can, marrow from bones, organs for their nutrients, fat because without it, you'd wither in the cold. The Siberian landscape also teaches a cruel truth. The climate is your true master. When storms sweep in, you don't challenge them, you hide. You crouch in low shelters made from snow blocks or huddle under stretched hides, waiting out blizzards that can last for days. The sound of the wind becomes a physical thing, a roar that shakes the very air you breathe. But there's a rhythm here too, a cycle you've learned to trust. Winters are for conserving energy, huddling in camps, mending tools, and telling the old stories. Spring draws you to the rivers, where fish run thick. Summer is for gathering berries and roots, drying meat and preparing hides before the next freeze. Autumn is the season of big hunts, when the animals are fat from summer feeding, and you stockpile for the months ahead. Occasionally you hear of people who wander too far east and never return. Some say they followed the herds to strange, open lands beyond the horizon where the sun seems a little different, where the earth feels unfamiliar underfoot. They vanish into the white and their names are spoken like half-forgotten dreams. You don't yet realize that those stories are the first whispers of what lies beyond the Bering Land Bridge, whispers of a whole other continent, waiting in the silence beyond the ice. For now you tend the fire, mend your spear, and watch the horizon where the herds move, because when they go you'll go, and one day following them will lead you farther than you ever imagined. Each night, as you sit by the fire gnawing on strips of dried meat, you hear the deep, rolling calls of mammoths in the distance. The sound carries through the stillness, mingling with the low howl of wolves. Somewhere ahead, both prey and predator are converging on the same open spaces. It's there, in those rich grazing grounds, that you'll have your best chance to make a kill before the journey takes you farther into the unknown. What you don't realize is that these slow, seasonal moves are pulling your people along a path that will over generations lead them across an entire continent, and each migration blurs the line between home and new ground a little more until one day the horizon you're chasing isn't Asia anymore.
Awaiting continue.
Each night as you sit by the fire gnawing on strips of dried meat, you hear the deep, rolling calls of mammoths in the distance. The sound carries through the stillness, mingling with the low howl of wolves. Somewhere ahead, both prey and predator are converging on the same open spaces. It's there, in those rich grazing grounds, that you'll have your best chance to make a kill before the journey takes you farther into the unknown. What you don't realize is that these slow seasonal moves are pulling your people along a path that will over generations lead them across an entire continent, and each migration blurs the line between home and new ground a little more, until one day the horizon you're chasing isn't Asia anymore. Awaiting continue. Section 4. The first real signs of movement begin with the herds. It's not sudden, no stampede, no great exodus, but a slow, deliberate drift. Woolly mammoths, steppe bison, reindeer, and wild horses start pressing east, noses lifted to catch the wind. It's instinct that drives them, honed over thousands of seasonal cycles. Somewhere ahead, the pastures are richer, the snow shallower, and the ice less cruel. And just as it has always been, where the herds go, you follow. Hunting is not a matter of waiting in one place and hoping something wanders past. Out here, survival depends on tracking, reading the earth like a script, a broken crust of snow, a tuft of coarse hair snagged on a dwarf willow, the crushed outline of a hoof in the frost. These are your trail markers. You and your kin move in a loose line, eyes scanning the ground, the horizon and the sky for signs of the great beasts you depend on. In late spring, the animals travel in vast migratory streams across Beringia, their trails worn into the earth over countless generations. Mammoths, moving in matriarch-led herds, graze as they go, tearing up clumps of grass with their muscular trunks. Steppe bison walk in tight clusters, their horns tilting forward in wary readiness against predators. Reindeer dart in more scattered lines, nimble over icy ridges, their hooves clicking against stone. Your people plan their movements around these patterns. Hunters range ahead to scout for bottlenecks, river crossings, narrow valleys, ridges that funnel the herds. These are the places where the hunt can succeed, where your spears can strike without the prey scattering in every direction. And in the Ice Age, nothing is wasted. A single mammoth can feed a group for weeks. Its hide becomes tents, clothing and ropes. Its bones shape tools and even frames for shelter. But hunting is only half the story. The herds also bring other predators. Wolf packs with coats like shadows, cave lions that melt into the landscape until they're nearly on you, and the towering short-faced bear, fast enough to outrun a human in short bursts. These predators follow the same paths you do, and encounters can turn deadly. Sometimes you shadow the herds at a distance, letting the predators take their kill and then scavenging what they leave behind. It's a dangerous gamble, close enough to take advantage, far enough not to become the next meal. The land bridge itself changes with the seasons. In summer, the permafrost softens at the surface, turning some stretches into soggy bogs that slow travel to a crawl. Mosquitoes descend in swarms so thick they can drive reindeer into frantic runs, and you learn to smear mud on your skin to keep them from biting. In winter, the world hardens again into a bone-white plain where the snow's crust will sometimes hold your weight and sometimes collapse without warning. The wind can carry the smell of herds from miles away, guiding you toward them like a scent map. Moving with the herds also means moving with the weather. As the sun lingers longer each day, you feel the subtle shift in the air, a hint of thaw. Streams begin to trickle through the ice, and patches of grass emerge. The animals stop less often to dig for food. The ground gives it up more freely now. This is when travel is fastest. You can walk for hours without needing to stop and warm your feet, and your group can cover ground before the next storm arrives. You begin to notice the changes in the land itself. The grasses are slightly different here, the soil underfoot, richer and darker. Birds' calls change, with some species you don't recognize appearing on the edges of camp. You are moving into a zone where Asia begins to give way to America, though you wouldn't name it that. To you it's just the other side, where the sun rises a little earlier, where the wind smells faintly of salt from distant waters. Each night, as you sit by the fire gnawing on strips of dried meat, you hear the deep rolling calls of mammoths in the distance. The sound carries through the stillness, mingling with the low howl of wolves. Somewhere ahead, both prey and predator are converging on the same open spaces. It's there, in those rich grazing grounds, that you'll have your best chance to make a kill before the journey takes you farther into the unknown. What you don't realize is that these slow, seasonal moves are pulling your people along a path that will, over generations, lead them across an entire continent, and each migration blurs the line between home and new ground a little more, until one day the horizon you're chasing isn't Asia anymore. Awaiting continue. The first real signs of movement begin with the herds. It's not sudden, no stampede, no great exodus, but a slow, deliberate drift. Woolly mammoths, steppe bison, reindeer, and wild horses start pressing east, noses lifted to catch the wind. It's instinct that drives them, honed over thousands of seasonal cycles. Somewhere ahead the pastures are richer, the snow shallower, and the ice less cruel, and just as it has always been, where the herds go, you follow. Hunting is not a matter of waiting in one place and hoping something wanders past. Out here, survival depends on tracking, reading the earth like a script. A broken crust of snow, a tuft of coarse hair snagged on a dwarf willow, the crushed outline of a hoof in the frost. These are your trail markers. You and your kin move in a loose line, eyes scanning the ground, the horizon and the sky for signs of the great beasts you depend on. In late spring, the animals travel in vast migratory streams across Beringia, their trails worn into the earth over countless generations. Mammoths, moving in matriarch-led herds, graze as they go, tearing up clumps of grass with their muscular trunks. Steppe bison walk in tight clusters, their horns tilting forward in wary readiness against predators. Reindeer dart in more scattered lines, nimble over icy ridges, their hooves clicking against stone. Your people plan their movements around these patterns. Hunters range ahead to scout for bottlenecks, river crossings, narrow valleys, ridges that funnel the herds. These are the places where the hunt can succeed, where your spears can strike without the prey scattering in every direction, and in the Ice Age, nothing is wasted. A single mammoth can feed a group for weeks. Its hide becomes tents, clothing and ropes. Its bones shape tools and even frames for shelter. But hunting is only half the story. The herds also bring other predators, wolf packs with coats like shadows, cave lions that melt into the landscape until they're nearly on you, and the towering short-faced bear, fast enough to outrun a human in short bursts. These predators follow the same paths you do, and encounters can turn deadly. Sometimes you shadow the herds at a distance, letting the predators take their kill and then scavenging what they leave behind. It's a dangerous gamble, close enough to take advantage, far enough not to become the next meal. The land bridge itself changes with the seasons. In summer, the permafrost softens at the surface, turning some stretches into soggy bogs that slow travel to a crawl. Mosquitoes descend in swarms so thick they can drive reindeer into frantic runs, and you learn to smear mud on your skin to keep them from biting. In winter, the world hardens again into a bone-white plain where the snow's crust will sometimes hold your weight and sometimes collapse without warning. The wind can carry the smell of herds from miles away, guiding you toward them like a scent map. Moving with the herds also means moving with the weather. As the sun lingers longer each day, you feel the subtle shift in the air, a hint of thaw. Streams begin to trickle through the ice and patches of grass emerge. The animals stop less often to dig for food. The ground gives it up more freely now. This is when travel is fastest. You can walk for hours without needing to tow, and warm your feet, and your group can cover ground before the next storm arrives. You begin to notice the changes in the land itself. The grasses are slightly different here, the soil underfoot, richer and darker. Birds' calls change, with some species you don't recognize appearing on the edges of camp. You are moving into a zone where Asia begins to give way to America, though you wouldn't name it that. To you it's just the other side, where the sun rises a little earlier, where the wind smells faintly of salt from distant waters. Each night, as you sit by the fire gnawing on strips of dried meat, you hear the deep, rolling calls of mammoths in the distance. The sound carries through the stillness, mingling with the low howl of wolves. Somewhere ahead, both prey and predator are converging on the same open spaces. It's there, in those rich grazing grounds, that you'll have your best chance to make a kill before the journey takes you farther into the unknown. What you don't realize is that these slow seasonal moves are pulling your people along a path that will, over generations, lead them across an entire continent, and each migration blurs the line between home and new ground a little more, until one day, the horizon you're chasing isn't Asia anymore. The line between following the herds and crossing into entirely new territory is so fine you hardly notice when it's crossed. The land under your feet feels the same, dry steppe in some places, frozen tundra in others, yet slowly, the shapes of the horizon begin to change. The sun tracks across the sky in a slightly different arc. The wind carries new scents, hints of plants and animals you've never encountered. Without realizing it, you and your people are walking into history, the first human migrations across the Bering Land Bridge. The evidence for these movements will one day be scattered in fragments, stone tools buried in ancient riverbanks, bits of charcoal from long-dead campfires, the bones of hunted animals left behind in the frozen soil. But in your moment, nothing about it feels monumental, it's simply survival. You move because the herds move, because the winters are long, because the promise of better hunting grounds is worth the gamble of the unknown. You travel in small family groups, 20 or 30 people, all you can feed with what you carry and what you catch. The elders guide the route, recalling landmarks from their own migrations, a river shaped like a crooked finger, a cliff with red stone that glows at sunset, a valley where mammoths gather in the spring melt. Children are carried when they tire, bundled in hides against the cold, while the strongest adults range ahead to scout for danger or opportunity. Crossing from Siberia into what will one day be Alaska takes weeks, sometimes months, depending on the season. In late spring, rivers fed by melting snow can swell into torrents, forcing detours miles out of the way. In winter, ice makes for faster travel but carries its own risks. A single crack beneath your feet can plunge you into water cold enough to kill in minutes. You've learned to test ice with your spear before trusting it. You don't think of yourselves as pioneers, you're just moving within the range of your world, but the range itself is stretching. The line of mammoth trails extends into territory where the grasses grow a little differently, the snow crust forms harder underfoot, and the sky at night feels almost sharper in its stillness. The journey demands constant vigilance. Even the most experienced hunters can misjudge the land. Some valleys are choked with drifted snow so deep you sink to your waist. Others are treacherous with hidden ice, where a single slip could break a bone. A disaster in a world without hospitals. You keep your camp close to water sources, melting ice and snow in hide bags over the fire, always careful not to overuse your fuel stores. Food is both the reason you move and your greatest worry. Large kills are shared equally, but they never last as long as you hope. Meat strips are smoked over low fires, hides scraped and cleaned as soon as the animal is down. Fat is rendered into a thick, calorie-rich paste that can be eaten on the move. Bones are cracked open for marrow, a prized source of energy in the cold. Your tools show where you've come from. The stone points you carry are shaped in styles your ancestors perfected over generations. Some are leaf-shaped, others fluted, each designed for a specific prey or hunting technique. Hafting these points to spear shafts takes hours of careful work, often done at night by firelight while others sleep. At times the journey brings you into contact with other groups. Some are distant kin you've traded with before, others are strangers whose language you only partly understand. A few meetings lead to exchanges of goods and knowledge, different ways of making fire, better methods for scraping hides, new songs that tell old stories. But not every meeting is friendly. Disputes over hunting grounds can turn violent, and in the vast emptiness of Berindia, there is no authority to settle them. There is no single moment when you realize you've crossed into a new land. The land bridge is so broad that you may live your entire life on it without ever reaching either edge. But step by step, year by year, your people's range is drifting eastward. Some of your hunters talk about pushing farther, toward rivers they've heard are thick with fish, toward valleys where the game is said to be abundant even in winter. Others want to linger, wary of what lies beyond the horizon. And yet, slowly, the pull of the east wins. The herds move that way, the seasons guide you that way, and without knowing it, your footprints are among the first left by humans in a world that until now has never heard our voices or felt the weight of our presence. Weeks turn into months, and months into years. For some families, the long migration stalls in the middle of the bridge, not because they've lost the way, but because Berindia itself is good enough to call home. Here, between the crushing ice sheets to the south and the frozen seas to the north, lies a vast, open land, rich with game. It's a rare pocket of stability in the chaos of the Ice Age, and for generations, People will live and die here without ever setting foot on what you'd call the other side. Thuringia isn't empty. In summer it bursts into life. The sun lingers for nearly 24 hours at its peak, melting the snow from the grasslands and filling the air with the buzzing of insects. Herds graze almost constantly, taking advantage of the brief season to fatten up for the long winter ahead. Rivers swell with meltwater and run clear, thick with salmon and grayling. Birds from across the northern hemisphere nest here. Geese, ducks, even swans, drawn to the safety of the endless daylight. If you live here, your year has a rhythm. In spring, you fish the rivers, hunt migrating waterfowl, and collect eggs from the grassy banks. Summer is for the big game hunts, mammoth, bison, and caribou. Autumn brings the last chance to fill your food stores before the first frost creeps in. Winter is survival mode, moving less, conserving energy, keeping fires alive through the long nights when the sun barely touches the horizon. Your dwellings adapt to the season. In summer you may live in tents of stitched hides, easy to take down and carry to the next hunting ground. In winter, you dig into the earth or build semi-permanent huts from mammoth bones covered in thick layers of hides, insulating them with sod and snow. The entrance faces away from the wind, and a small smoke hole vent lets the fire breathe without filling the shelter with choking fumes. Daily life here is a careful balance between preparation and opportunity. You might wake to find fresh mammoth tracks cutting across the grasslands too valuable to ignore. The entire group shifts into hunting mode, following the trail for hours or even days until the animal is brought down. Every part of it will be used, the meat smoked, the hide scraped and tanned, the bones carved into tools, the sinew twisted into bowstrings and thread. Even the fat is saved, melted down into tallow for cooking or mixed with powdered plants for primitive lamps. Living in Thuringia also means learning its dangers. The weather can turn without warning, burying the land in whiteouts so thick you can't see your own hands. Frostbite comes fast if skin is left exposed. Predators shadow your movements, wolves watching from the ridgelines, their breath steaming in the cold. In summer the threat shifts to swarms of mosquitoes, so relentless they can drive caribou into icy rivers just to escape. And always, there's the unspoken fear of running out of food before the season turns. But there's something else here too: connection. People from the west, still tied to Siberia, meet those from farther east, who have already reached the Alaskan side. Trade moves between them, fine chert for tools, shells from the Pacific coast, beads carved from mammoth ivory. Stories travel with them as well, and slowly, the idea of lands beyond, lands with strange animals and unfamiliar rivers, begins to take shape in the minds of those who have never seen them. Generations pass this way. Children are born who have never seen the ice walls of the south or the endless forests beyond Siberia. To them, Thuringia is simply the world. The line between migration and settlement blurs. You build familiarity with the hills, rivers and valleys. You know which streams freeze last in winter, which ridges the caribou cross in spring, which hollows hold the least snow in a storm. Yet, change is inevitable. Slowly, imperceptibly, the climate begins to shift. The ice sheets are not eternal. Glaciers retreat and advance in cycles, and as they change, so does the land. Rivers alter their courses, some hunting grounds grow less reliable, and some animal herds move farther east. The old trails through Thuringia become stepping stones towards something new, not because you choose to leave, but because the land itself pushes you onward. One day, perhaps in pursuit of a bison herd, or seeking a river that no longer freezes solid, you cross a rise and see a horizon unlike any you've known. The ground dips into a broad valley, and beyond it, the shape of mountains unlike those of Siberia. You've reached the far side of the bridge without ever really deciding to. And for your people, this will not be an ending, but the beginning of another long walk into a continent where no human footprints have ever been. You crest that ridge and step into a new world. Though the land doesn't make an announcement, there's no grand marker to say welcome to Alaska. The hills roll out ahead of you just as they did behind, the wind still cold enough to bite through your hood, and the sky still stretches vast and pale over an open horizon. But you're no longer on the great midpoint of Thuringia. You've crossed into the far eastern edge, and the soil beneath your boots is part of what will one day be called North America. This final push is the hardest part of the journey. The closer you get to the Alaskan side, the more the land begins to close in. To the south, massive glaciers, the Cordilleran, rise like frozen walls, blocking easy passage down the Pacific coast. To the east, the Laurentide ice sheet sprawls across much of the continent, a solid white mass, stretching to a horizon you can't even imagine. Between these two giants lies a narrow strip of ice-free land, not always continuous, and not always friendly. The rivers here run fast and cold, even in summer, cutting deep channels through the tundra. Crossing them is a dangerous business. You find shallows when you can, moving carefully with your spear as a walking staff, feeling for the stones underfoot. In winter, the crossings can be easier if the ice holds, but it doesn't always, and one slip into water this cold can be the end. Food becomes trickier to find. The herds you've followed for weeks may veer off into valleys you can't reach, blocked by ice cliffs or deep snow. You take smaller game where you can, hares, ptarmigan, fish pulled from holes in the ice, and ration your stores carefully. Fat becomes the most valuable thing you carry. Without it, your body burns itself out just to stay warm. This is also where you start to see new signs of life. The mosses underfoot are subtly different from those in Siberia. The shrubs that cling to the slopes bear berries you've never tasted. The birds' calls are unfamiliar, and sometimes you catch the fleeting glimpse of an animal you can't quite name, shapes that will one day be known as muskox, moose, or even grizzly bear. You're stepping into an ecosystem that hasn't learned to fear humans yet. Shelter here is crucial. The wind comes hard off the glaciers, funneled through valleys like the breath of the ice itself. Your group builds low, wind-proof camps, stacking sod and snow over hides to seal in the heat. Fires are small to conserve fuel, and every ember is guarded carefully. Even sleeping, you keep your fur hood pulled tight around your face, your breath frosting the inside. Travel is dictated as much by the land's mood as by your own needs. Sometimes the only way forward is along ridgelines where the wind has scoured the snow away, leaving hard, frozen ground. Other times you're forced to detour for days to skirt the edge of a frozen marsh or bypass a steep ice slope. There are no trails here except those you make, and no one who's gone ahead to tell you which routes are safe. And yet, despite the hardships, something in this place feels different, almost promising. The air is fresher somehow, the horizon's wider. It's a land that seems to be waiting, as though it has always been here, empty for the moment you and your kind would arrive. You don't know it, but you've just entered a continent where no human voice has yet shouted across a valley, where no fire has ever burned in the night, where the only stories told are those written in the wind, the rivers, and the flight of birds. Some groups will stop here, in this far corner of Alaska, making it their home for generations. They'll learn every bend in the rivers, every seasonal shift in the herds. Others will press on, finding paths southward along the ice-free corridors, or hugging the dangerous, icy coastline. For now, you're simply part of the first wave, people carried by the pull of survival and the rhythm of migration into a land that will change your descendants forever. Your boots crunch in snow that no human has ever marked before. The cold bites at your face, but the land ahead is open, waiting. The bridge behind you is still there, but your eyes are fixed forward, toward the great white unknown. The path forward isn't a single road, it's a choice between two very different gambles. Once you've set foot in this new corner of the world, the glaciers dictate your options. To the east, the Laurentide ice sheet blocks much of the interior like a frozen fortress wall. To the west and south, the Cordilleran ice sheet presses hard against the Pacific. Between them lies the so-called ice-free corridor, narrow, unpredictable, and not always truly open. This corridor, when conditions allow, is a ribbon of land running roughly between the two massive ice sheets. At its best, it's a frozen steppe of wind-scoured ground, dotted with shallow lakes and sparse vegetation. At its worst, it's choked with glaciers and meltwater floods. The truth is, during some parts of the Ice Age, this route was completely impassable, sealed under crushing layers of ice. But when the glaciers retreat just enough, it becomes a viable if harsh passage deep into the continent's interior. Traveling it is not for the faint-hearted. The wind roars through the gap like a living thing, carrying fine ice crystals that sting your skin raw. The ground underfoot alternates between rock-hard permafrost and ankle-deep sludge, where meltwater pools. You have to carry food for stretches where game is scarce, and the only meat you see for days might be the occasional ptarmigan or a desperate fish pulled from a half-frozen stream. But if you make it through, you emerge into the vast grasslands that lie beyond, lands teeming with bison, mammoth, and other Ice Age giants. The other route, hugging the coastline, is a different kind of challenge. It's a narrow strip of ice-free land along the Pacific shore, wedged between the Cordilleran ice and the pounding waves of a much colder than modern ocean. Here the land bridge itself is behind you, but the journey south is broken by headlands, inlets, and the occasional glacier that spills right into the sea. Boats made from hide and driftwood can carry you past the most dangerous sections, but the ocean is unforgiving. Storms blow in without warning, and a single rogue wave can snatch you from your craft. Yet, for those who master it, the coastal route offers bounty: shellfish pried from the rocks at low tide, fish caught with bone hook lines, sea mammals hunted for their meat, oil, and hides. You can move faster here than inland, provided you know how to read the tides and currents. It's also a route rich in variety: forests of stunted spruce, beaches littered with kelp and driftwood, and cliffs alive with seabirds. Some groups choose the corridor, others the coast. Over centuries, both routes will be used again and again, and evidence of these movements will one day be buried in ancient campsites and the DNA of the people who live thousands of miles from here. The decision isn't always yours to make. Weather, the movement of herds, and the shifting reach of the glaciers can close one route and open another. Sometimes you set out thinking you'll follow the coast, only to be forced inland by a storm that rages for days. Other times you plan to push through the corridor, only to find it choked with ice and impassable meltwater. Both paths share one truth: there's no turning back. The land bridge behind you won't last forever. Even now the climate is changing in subtle ways. The summers a little longer, the winters a little less brutal, the seas inching higher as ice melts. One day, Beringia will be gone, drowned under the rising ocean, and the connection between these continents will vanish. For you and your people that means the only way is forward, deeper into a continent that has never known your kind. You don't think of yourself as making history. You think about the next meal, the next shelter, the next sunrise, but every step you take along this corridor or coast is a line drawn on the map of human expansion, a map that for now exists only in footprints and fire rings in the snow. The farther you push into this new land, the more you depend on the tools and techniques you've carried from the old world. They're not luxuries here, they're the fine line between seeing another sunrise and becoming just another frozen shape on the tundra. Your primary weapon is still the spear, sometimes short and balanced for throwing, sometimes longer for thrusting in close. The stone points are crafted from chert or obsidian, each flake carefully struck away until the edges are razor sharp. The best points are thin but strong, hafted to wooden shafts with sinew and hide glue, then bound tight so they won't loosen in the cold. You carry spares, wrapped in hide to protect the edges from chipping in transit. Fire making is another craft you've perfected. You carry dry tinder, fungus, shredded bark, tufts of grass in pouches made from animal hide, kept under your clothing to protect it from damp. The fire kit includes a piece of flint and a steel-hard shard of pyrite. A sharp strike showers sparks onto the tinder, coaxed to life with careful breath. In this world, fire is your only true ally, cooking your food, drying your hides, keeping predators at bay, and warding off the killing cold. Clothing is less about style and more about survival engineering. Layers of caribou hide trap heat better than any other fur, with the hollow hairs acting like tiny insulation tubes. Mammoth hide is used for outer layers, dense and wind-resist. Seal skin, when traded from coastal groups, makes the best waterproof coverings. Every seam is sewn with bone needles and sinew thread, strong enough to resist splitting even under heavy strain. Storage matters too. You can't carry much, so what you do carry must be essential. Meat is dried into thin strips and stored in skin bags. Fat is rendered into tallow and sealed in hide pouches, keeping it soft for months. Tools are tucked into belts or slung in leather satchels. You even carry bone fish hooks, shaped like small question marks, and spools of braided sinew line for when you reach rivers and coasts. Your shelters are built for speed and efficiency. When you stop for only a night, hides are draped over a frame of saplings or bones anchored with stones to keep out the wind. For longer stays, the shelter is half dug into the ground, insulated with sod, snow, or a double layer of hides. The fire sits at the center, its smoke escaping through a small vent, and everyone sleeps close to the heat, with the youngest and weakest in the warmest spots. Even with these tools, survival is a constant calculation. You plan each move based on what you know of the land, where the rivers run, where the herds pass, where you can find dry wood for fires. In unfamiliar territory, you read the signs as you go, the angle of the sun, the tracks in the snow, the smell of the air. A sudden silence can mean predators are near. A distant bird call might hint at open water. When the weather turns, tools can't save you alone. A blizzard can erase the world in minutes, smothering your path in white. Then the only thing that matters is finding shelter before your body temperature drops too far. You've learned to build snow walls to block the wind, to pile hides over branches for an instant lean-to to huddle close enough for shared warmth. In this vast, ice-bound wilderness, your technology isn't a mark of progress, it's the echo of countless generations who faced the same dangers. Every bone needle, every spear point, every knot in a hide cord is a piece of inherited knowledge, tested and proven by lives lived and lost before you. Without them you wouldn't have made it across the bridge, let alone into the heart of this new continent. And yet for all your preparation, this land still feels unpredictable. You have no maps, no guarantee of where the next hunt will succeed. All you have is your skill, your memory, and the tools in your hands. Here, that's enough to keep moving, but only if you use them wisely. The land begins to speak in new voices. You've grown used to the low guttural calls of mammoths, the sharp barks of wolves, and the whistling wind over the open tundra. But here, deep in the new world, you start to hear sounds you've never known before. It might be the heavy rustle of some massive creature in the brush, the deep wet squelch of a hoof in a marsh you didn't expect, or a strange trumpeting call carried over the snow from an unseen valley. You're meeting the megafauna of the Americas for the first time. Some, like the mammoth, are familiar, they crossed the bridge alongside you, but others are entirely new to human eyes. The mastodon looks at a glance like a smaller, stockier mammoth, but its tusks curve differently and its diet is written in the branches it strips from trees. In the deeper grasslands, giant ground sloths move with deliberate slowness, their shaggy forms towering over you when they rear up to reach higher leaves. They are slow, yes, but powerful, armed with claws the length of your forearm. There are also predators here that you've never faced before. Saber-toothed cats, with their long curved canine teeth, stalk the same herds you hunt. They are stealthy, able to vanish into tall grass until they're only paces away. The American lion, larger than any cat in the old world, moves like a shadow, and you may not know it's near until you see its paw prints in the snow the next morning. Even the bears are different here. The short-faced bear towers over the tallest man, with long legs built for speed, making it a danger both to hunt and to avoid. The smaller creatures catch your attention too. The beavers here are giants compared to the ones back in Asia, building dams that turn small streams into wide ponds. Armadillo-like glyptodonts wander the plains, their domed shells like mobile boulders. Birds flash strange colors, some with calls that echo oddly in the crisp air. Every day feels like stepping into a chapter of a story you've never heard before, one written without your kind in mind. These encounters change the way you hunt. You learn quickly that mastodon herds are not as easily driven as mammoths. They stand their ground, using their tusks to defend each other. The giant sloths, despite their slow pace, can maim with a single swipe if you get too close. You approach predators with more caution than ever, sometimes shadowing them to steal from their kills, sometimes avoiding them altogether if you think the risk outweighs the gain. At night, the campfire becomes more than warmth. It's your fortress. The light and smoke keep many predators at bay, and the noise of the fire masks the sounds of your people's breathing, making it harder for hunters in the dark to locate you. You sleep in shifts, knowing that something might be watching from just beyond the circle of firelight. But there's also opportunity in this unfamiliar wilderness. New animals mean new sources of food, hides and bone. The mastodon's ivory is as workable as mammoth, its hide thick and durable. The giant sloth's meat is rich and fatty, enough to feed the group for days. Even the dangerous predators, when killed, provide furs, claws and teeth that become tools, ornaments, or trade goods. The children in your group will grow up knowing these animals as part of their world, just as you once knew only the herds of Siberia and Burindia. They will learn to read the tracks of a saber-toothed cat as easily as you read the path of a reindeer, and in time, they will teach their own children to live among these giants. You don't realize it, but this is one of humanity's great turning points. Every time you adapt to a new creature, every time you learn its habits, its strengths, and its weaknesses, you weave yourself deeper into this land's fabric. You become part of its story, and it becomes part of yours. The ancient bridge that carried you here may fade beneath the rising seas, but the footsteps you've left in this soil will carry forward in every generation that follows. By now, your people have gone far enough that the land bridge is not even a memory for the youngest among you. This new world feels like it has always been home, even though your elders still speak of the crossing of the endless grasslands of Burinya, of the long nights under a sky that seemed to swallow the earth. Here, in the first reaches of North America, you've begun to settle, at least for seasons at a time. A good camp starts with location. You seek a place sheltered from the worst winds, near a water source that doesn't freeze solid in winter, Often that means the bend of a river or the lee of a rocky outcrop. The ground must be dry enough to keep you out of the spring meltwater but close enough to game trails that you don't waste days in the hunt. Once the spot is chosen, the group sets to work with the speed of practiced hands, driving stakes into the ground, draping hides, sealing gaps with sod, snow or moss. Some shelters are simple, hide tents over a frame of wood or bone, quick to erect and just as quick to take down. Others are more permanent, semi-subterranean houses dug into the earth, their walls lined with stone or mammoth bone, roofs layered with hides and soil for insulation. In these more stable camps you store food in pits lined with stone, keeping it frozen through the winter, safe from predators. Daily life in these early settlements is a blend of work, watchfulness, and small comforts. The hunters range out at dawn, tracking herds or scanning for smaller game. Those who stay in camp tend fires, repair clothing and tools, prepare hides, and keep an eye on the children. Fish traps are checked, bone needles stitch tears in winter boots, and sinew cords are twisted into rope. Food is never taken for granted. Even when the hunting is good, you preserve what you can, smoking meat over slow fires, drying fish in the wind, rendering fat into tallow. Nothing is wasted. Bones become awls and spear tips, sinew becomes thread, hides become clothing or shelter. You even burn dung from grazing animals when wood is scarce, the smoke curling into the still air above camp. The campfire becomes the heart of the settlement. At night, everyone gathers close, sharing warmth and stories. The elders tell of animals so big they blot out the sun, of hunts that lasted days, of the great crossing when the sea was still far away. Sometimes they speak of strange lights in the sky, the northern aurora, and the belief that they are spirits moving in the heavens, watching over the people. Danger is never far. Predators will test your defenses, prowling just beyond the firelight. You post watchers at night, listening for the crunch of snow under paws. The weather can turn suddenly, forcing you to reinforce shelters or move camp entirely. A sudden thaw can flood low-lying sites, while an early frost can ruin a hunting season before it begins. Still, there's a sense of ownership here. You begin to learn the land's rhythms, the routes the herds favor, the lakes that yield the best fish, the berry patches that ripen in late summer. Over time, trails form between seasonal camps, worn into the earth by countless feet. These paths become the arteries of your life here, connecting one safe place to another, binding your people to this land in ways deeper than you realize. Though the rest of the continent lies waiting, for now this corner of it is enough. You can survive here, you can raise children here, you can tell stories by the fire here, and in those stories, the bridge between worlds will fade from a place you crossed to a place you came from, a distant memory, replaced by the reality of the land you now call home. Over the years, though you don't think in terms of years, your people move farther and farther from that first camp on the edge of Alaska. The migration is not a single sweeping wave, but a slow, pulsing spread. Groups split off to follow different herds, or to explore valleys where the smoke of other people's fires can't be seen. Some drift inland along the great rivers, others hug the coast, taking advantage of the rich waters. With every season, human footprints press deeper into the continent. The spread is measured in generations. Children grow up hearing only second-hand about the land bridge and the old country. To them, the mountains, rivers, and grasslands here are not new, they are simply home. Each group carries a slightly different set of skills and traditions, shaped by the lands they inhabit. A coastal band might know how to build skin-covered boats to chase seals and sea lions. An inland group may be expert in driving bison into natural traps between ridges. Game guides your expansion. Bison herds thunder across open plains that seem to stretch forever. Caribou sweep through the tundra in great, flowing rivers of life. Elk and moose haunt the river valleys, and farther south, you begin to see deer unlike any in the north. In some regions, the grasslands give way to vast forests, dark, thick, and teeming with life you've never hunted before. Black bears, wild turkeys, and strange, swift-footed cats. The further south you go, the more the world changes. Winters grow shorter, summers longer. Rivers run unfrozen for most of the year, and the variety of plants explodes. Suddenly you have not just berries and roots but edible tubers, wild grains, and fruits you've never tasted. This diversity means more stable food supplies, and in turn, more permanent camps. But movement never stops entirely. People follow the seasons, shifting camps to match the migrations of animals or the ripening of certain plants. Over decades, these shifts carry some groups far from the original crossing point. They spread east to the edges of the great inland seas of ice, south along the spine of the Rockies, and west into the river valleys that lead to the Pacific coast. The distances are immense, but time blurs them. One generation moves 2 valleys south, the next moves beyond the next ridge. After a few lifetimes, those ridges and valleys add up to hundreds, even thousands of miles. Within what will be only a few thousand years, humans will stand in places as far apart as the high plains of what will become Argentina and the tropical lowlands of Central America. Trade begins to stretch across these distances too, though you wouldn't call it trade in any modern sense. It's the slow hand-to-hand passing of goods from one group to another, a shell from a distant shore, a finely worked stone from a quarry, hundreds of miles away, a story told in a language that blends words from different places. Everywhere you go, fire marks your passage, old camp rings dot the land, black circles in the soil, stone flakes from tool making, lie buried in riverbanks, bones of hunted animals, split for marrow, scatter in forgotten clearings. The land begins to carry the quiet signature of your presence. And just as in the north, you adapt to each new landscape with tools and skills, tailored to its demands. In the open plains, your spears are long and heavy, for throwing at running game. In the forests, they're shorter, easier to handle in tight spaces. Along the coast, nets and fishing hooks join your kit. In every place, you learn to read the signs of the land, the tilt of the grass in the wind, the direction of bird flight, the timing of the salmon run. In time, the people who began as one group on the edge of Asia will be many peoples, scattered across a hemisphere. You won't remember the day the first foot touched this soil. You won't know exactly when the last foot left the land bridge, but the spread will continue until the edges of this vast unknown world are no longer unknown at all. With every step farther into the continent, your people are not just adapting to the land, they are changing it. The great herds of megafauna that once roamed without fear now move differently because of you. Animals that have never seen a human before learn to recognize your scent, your shape, the danger in the sharp gleam of your spear points. At first your impact is subtle. You hunt for food, not for conquest, taking only what your group needs. But the most successful hunts target the biggest, healthiest animals, those with the most meat and the thickest hides. Over time, this quiet selection begins to change the herds. The mammoths that survive tend to be smaller. The bison shift their migratory routes to avoid valleys where people lie in wait. Mastodons grow more skittish, disappearing into forests when the smell of smoke drifts on the wind. In some places the pressure is more intense. A valley that once supported hundreds of bison in the spring may hold only a few dozen after years of hunting. The giant sloths, slow, powerful, and once unafraid, become harder to find. The saber-toothed cats that shadow the herds may follow fewer prey, sometimes wandering into your camps in desperation. But it's not just hunting that leaves its mark. Your fires clear undergrowth, open new grazing patches, and drive game into the open. The ash from burned plants enriches the soil, bringing back different growth than before. These small, repeated changes ripple outward, affecting the balance of plants, herbivores and predators alike. In some regions, your arrival coincides with climate shifts already underway. As the ice sheets slowly retreat, ecosystems shift, grasslands give way to forests, and some animals can't adapt quickly enough. The combination of warming temperatures and the new human presence pushes certain species to the edge. Some will vanish entirely within a few thousand years, their bones lying in the soil as silent witnesses to a lost age. The American lion, the glyptodont, the giant beaver, the mammoth. You don't think of yourself as causing these changes. You think of yourself as surviving, moving, hunting, building fires, raising children. You tell stories of the great beasts you've seen, of hunts won and lost, of close escapes from predators. But without knowing it, you and your descendants are reshaping the very character of this hemisphere. Still, for all the animals that grow rarer, the land remains rich in life. Deer, elk, caribou, and bison still move in great numbers. Birds fill the skies in migration seasons. Rivers teem with fish, and forests hide small game in every thicket. You adapt to the changes without much pause, switching to different prey, learning new tracking methods, exploring new regions. The land is vast enough that even with these shifts, it feels endless. If one hunting ground grows quiet, you move to another. If a river's salmon run fails, you try the next stream. The continent's size is your greatest advantage, an unbroken sweep of mountains, plains, deserts, and forests waiting to be learned. You leave more than just physical traces now. Symbols cut into bone, beads strung from shells, red ochre smeared on hides, all become part of your passing. These marks are not just for survival, they are for meaning, for identity, for telling the next generation that you were here. And as the centuries pass, you no longer think of yourselves as wanderers from another land. You are simply of this place, its rivers, its mountains, its changing herds. The bridge that once linked you to the old world has already begun to fade from memory, and the land you now walk is the only home you have ever needed. You may not know it, but the path you took across the ice bridge is written into your very body. Long after the land bridge itself has vanished beneath the sea, people far in the future will read that story in your bones, your teeth, and most telling of all, your blood. The shape of your skull, the patterns in your enamel, and the sequences in your DNA will whisper where you came from and how you got here. The connection between you and the people of Asia has not been broken, it has been stretched. Even now, you could trace it if you followed the trails back through Beringia, across Siberia, and into the deep heart of Eurasia. But here, in this new world, isolation will eventually take hold. When the seas rise again and the bridge is swallowed, your descendants will live for thousands of years without setting eyes on the land their ancestors left. Those descendants will be many and varied. As groups spread and settle in different parts of the continent, their languages will shift, their customs will adapt to the landscapes they inhabit. In the far north, people will remain tied to the rhythm of ice and snow, building lives around the migrations of caribou and seals. In the forests, they will learn the seasons of berries and roots, the habits of elk and deer. In the plains, they will follow the vast bison herds and shape their lives to the open sky. The tools they use will carry echoes of the old ways, the shape of a spear point, the method of working bone into needles, but over time, new forms will appear, a different curve to a blade, a unique pattern of flaking on a stone point, a distinct way of binding a spearhead with sinew. These innovations will spread slowly, passed from group to group along trade routes that are more like ripples than lines. And always, there will be stories. Around campfires, in the glow of embers, tales will be told of great hunts, of rivers so wide you cannot see the other side, of mountains that scrape the sky. Some of these stories will be rooted in the here and now, others will carry faint memories of a time before when people walked across a place where the ocean now rolls. The names of that place will change or vanish, but the idea will persist, a distant homeland, somewhere beyond the sunrise or sunset. Thousands of years from now, when strangers from far-off lands arrive by sea, they will meet your descendants and marvel at the similarities they see in their faces to people from across the world. They will not know that those similarities are the living legacy of the crossing carried forward in bone and blood since the days of the Great Ice Bridge. In this way, the land bridge will never truly be gone. It will live on in the people themselves, in their laughter, in their hands shaping tools, in the paths they walk through forests and over mountains. It is a bridge that still connects two worlds, not in soil and ice but in the living threads of ancestry woven through time. Even the stories carved into your tools and told around the fire can't prepare you for the surprises the land keeps revealing. For generations, you and your people have moved through valleys, rivers, and coastlines, confident you know the lay of the land, but the earth itself is not fixed. It shifts with the seasons, the climate and the will of ice and water. In some years the weather turns harsher, glaciers that had been in slow retreat lurch forward again, sealing off routes you once traveled freely. Other times the ice pulls back quickly, exposing new valleys, lakes, and passes that no one has seen in thousands of years. Meltwater floods roar down from the mountains without warning, tearing away forests and changing the courses of rivers overnight. The changes are not just in the land, they are in the way you understand your place within it. For many generations, the bridge across the Bering Sea was simply part of the world, a place you could cross if you had the strength and the reason. Now you begin to hear whispers from those who have gone back toward the west. The sea is rising, slowly, almost imperceptibly, but enough that certain familiar crossings have been swallowed. The farthest islands of Beringia are smaller now, their shorelines creeping inward year by year. In this time, your people develop a new kind of awareness. You no longer see the world as an endless plain or a boundless wilderness. There are edges now, places you cannot go because the ice is too thick, or the sea too wide, or the forest too impenetrable. You adapt by building new skills, stronger boats for coastal travel, better climbing methods for steep passes, new hunting techniques for prey that has learned to avoid you. Your tools evolve in step with these needs. You start to see finer craftsmanship in stone blades, more secure bindings in spear points, and new shapes in cutting tools for working wood and hide. Weapons become more versatile, fit for both the hunt and for defending against human rivals who might covet your best campsites or your food stores. It is in this era that some of the most remarkable discoveries occur, not by design but by necessity. A group cut off by ice might travel far south and find a corridor of warmth and abundance, deciding never to return north. Another might venture inland to escape a coastal storm and stumble upon rich fishing rivers or herds untouched by hunters. Each of these shifts plants the seeds of new settlements, new routes, and eventually, entirely new peoples. The bond to the old world is still there for a time. Some groups cross back, trading goods, stories and sometimes people, but the crossings become fewer, and each return trip takes longer. You don't yet know it, but soon the sea will close over the last remnants of the bridge, and what was once a single human population will become two, separated by a saltwater barrier that no one will cross again for thousands of years. And when that day comes, the paths you've walked here will be the only paths. The new world will no longer be a destination, it will simply be the world. The change comes slowly enough that no single person marks the day the bridge disappears. One season, the sea nibbles at a familiar crossing. A generation later the path is gone entirely, replaced by restless grey waves. Islands shrink and vanish. What was once an unbroken plain between continents becomes a straight narrow in places, but treacherous, cold and unpredictable. For the people who remain in the East, the old world is now a story, not a destination. You still tell it around fires on long winter nights, the tale of a land that stretched beyond the horizon, where mammoths roamed in herds too large to count, where the sun could shine all night in summer. But the children who listen will never set foot there. Their hunting grounds, their rivers, their mountains, are all here in the Americas. By now you are deeply woven into the fabric of this land. Campsites have become semi-permanent villages in some places, revisited year after year when the salmon run thick or the herds return. Trails link the coast to the interior, well worn by generations of hunters, traders, and families moving with the seasons. Tools have adapted to every environment: barbed fish spears for the rivers, light throwing darts for open plains, heavy bows for forest hunting. The animals you once saw as strangers are now part of your life. You know where the mastodons like to feed, how to predict the migration of caribou, how to track bison by the way their hooves mark the grass. You've even learned to respect the predators, not just to fear them, but to read their movements, sometimes using them to find the herds yourself. The land itself has changed since you first set foot here. The ice sheets are retreating, slowly unveiling a continent that stretches farther than anyone can travel in a lifetime. Rivers swell with glacial melt, carving deep valleys. Forests spread into places that were once bare tundra. The climate softens, though winters can still be brutal. The abundance of life grows, plants, animals and humans all adapting to the shifting world. And now, without realizing it, your people have become something new. You are no longer migrants, crossing a bridge between continents. You are the first generations of a hemisphere's human history. Over thousands of years, your descendants will travel from the high Arctic to the southernmost tip of South America. They will learn every shape the land can take: mountain, desert, swamp, and rainforest, and each place will leave its mark on them, shaping their languages, their skills, and their stories. The bridge itself will sink beneath the sea, but its memory will live on in the people who once walked it. They will carry its legacy, not in maps or monuments, but in the way they hunt, the way they speak, and the way they tell the story of how their ancestors came to this land. And far in the future, when others come by sea to these shores, they will find that the first chapter of the Americas began not with ships, but with footsteps across a plain of wind and ice that no longer exists, except in the blood and memory of those who still walk the land it led to. The fire burns low now, its light flickering across the inside of your shelter. Outside the wind has eased, and the world is quiet except for the soft crackle of embers and the faint call of a night bird in the distance. The cold that once bit so fiercely feels muted here, softened by the warmth of hides and the nearness of your people. You let your mind wander back along the path you've traveled, across rivers and ridges, through snowfields and grasslands, past the herds and the hunters, through the